On today's edition of Issues and Insiders, we delve into a documentary that depicts the plight of North Koreans who dare seek new lives beyond their borders, which was brought to poignant light by a director who had initially been doubtful about her ability to share their story. Hello, you're watching Thursday's edition of Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sunhee. A documentary about North Korean defectors has raised yet again concerns over rampant human rights abuses in their reclusive regime and more. For this, I have the director of this documentary, Madeleine Gavin, with us live on the line. Madeleine, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Right then, let's start off with a few words, Madeleine, on your thoughts as your documentary Beyond Utopia plays here in South Korea.
Yeah, I'm so excited that the film is playing really all over the world, but particularly South Korea. These South and North Korea were once one country, and I know there's so many families that have been split apart, and for really 75 years now. And so it's incredibly exciting for South Koreans to be able to see our film, because the whole point of this film was to try to put people in the shoes of North Koreans, because I saw that North Koreans and their voices were missing so much from our media, certainly in the United States, and that was the entire impetus for making this film. So I'm really excited.
Right, indeed. And staying with that, Madeleine, what ultimately led to your decision to direct this documentary? Because I understand initially you were quite hesitant about directing it.
I was, excuse me. Initially, I wasn't sure why I would be the right person for this film. And my producers, encouraged me to do some research and just sort of to see where it took me. And I ended up doing research for many months. And really what it was in the end was the absence of voices of North Koreans. It was finding footage, smuggled footage from inside North Korea about what real life was like inside North Korea, is like inside North Korea for your average North Korean, and feeling the pulse and the heartbeat of the people through that footage, and then seeing their absence in our media. And at a certain point, I just felt like, it's been more than 70 years now, and I haven't seen anything that really brings us up close and personal with North Koreans themselves. And I felt like I had no choice. I really felt like this film had to be made.
And just out of curiosity, Madeleine, how long exactly did your research take? And what did you focus it on?
It took many months, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. I did a deep dive into the internet. I was using VPNs. I was searching from different countries, searching in every language, finding different pieces of propaganda footage from inside North Korea. I was on North Korean sites, but I was also, again, finding this hidden camera footage that was really, these brave North Koreans have been risking their lives to shoot really since the famine in the 90s, shooting out of the sleeves of their coats, shooting out of the pockets of their jackets, hiding these flip phones and trying to get, the voices of their fellow countrymen and women out. So it was that. It was also reading every book that I could find. Watching every documentary that was being made, both inside North Korea, propaganda documentaries, and also some of the stuff that was being done mostly in South Korea and some parts of Europe. So it was very immersive, and it was many, many months.
How well aware had you been of the atrocities experienced by people in North Korea prior to making this documentary?
I was aware in the broadest, most general sense, the way I think a lot of people, certainly people I know in the United States, were aware and are aware. And so, yes, I had a vague sense of the atrocities. I had a vague sense of human rights abuses, but I really did not know the details of how, the Kim regime has maintained such power, how this country has remained so hermetically sealed off from the rest of the world, and what that means, what that takes in terms of human rights abuses to achieve that hermetically sealed world. And that was part of this immersive research, was I was just more and more heartbroken, outraged, and ultimately determined to help try at least to bring voices of North Koreans forward because they deserve this, and they've deserved it for so, so long.
Right, and Madeleine, that being said, among the harrowing tales shared by the defectors in your documentary, which ones affected you the most?
You know, there's so many stories that have affected me speaking to defectors, but I would have to say Soyeon Lee is the one. You know, Soyeon Lee is a mother in our film, and she defected 10 years previous and was forced to leave her son behind in North Korea. And in our film, we follow her attempts to get her son out. And, you know, there's a couple of things. I mean, one, Soyeon there are so many people like Soyeon, people who left North Korea with the intention of bringing family members out, and some succeed and some don't. And so it's unfortunately, very common, and really excruciating, because the isolation from your family members when you leave North Korea, it's not like leaving another country. You can't pick up the phone and call your family members. You can't email them. And so the brutal cutoff from your family is really wrenching for people. And there are so many defectors who suffer with that. And for a mother, you can imagine with her son in North Korea. And you know, one of the great ironies of what we discovered in the shooting of this film is that as much as Soyeon wanted to bring her son out and wanted to help him come out of the North, you know, her son, it appears now, may have actually wanted to bring his mother back to the North. And, you know, this goes to this sort of hermetically sealed reality inside North Korea that he didn't know about the outside world. And, you know, this is a kid, a teenager who perhaps just wanted to see his mother at any cost.
Madeleine, perhaps you could tell us a bit more about that boy and why you believe perhaps that he was so unaware about what was beyond the borders of his own country.
Well, you know, again, I mean, North Korea has survived this long because they have kept people unaware of what lies beyond the borders of their country. And that is becoming increasingly difficult for the Kim regime. I mean, there is, you know, North Korea and China have a more than 800-mile border, which is a river border. And despite, you know, the Kim regime's attempts to stop traffic over that river border, it is a porous border. And there is information that does get in and out. So there are, you know, people who are living near the river in North Korea may know something about the outside world. But for your average North Korean who is not living near the river, you know, you don't know. There is no internet. You know, you know, watching any kind of content from outside of North Korea is punishable by horrific, you know, punishments. And so the Soyeon's son may very well have not known what was beyond the river, what was beyond the border. He may have just been a young boy, a teenager wanting to see his mother. And that is the great irony, that right now it appears that he is, you know, in a gulag in North Korea being punished when in fact he may have actually been a believer in the regime. And that goes to something else, that the Kim regime, you know, and North Korea for all three generations of the Kim family have told their citizens that as you know, as difficult as life may be inside North Korea, life is even worse outside of North Korea. And you know, if that's what you're told and you're not shown anything else, then for many people that is what they believe. And there's another person in our film who also believed the same thing, 80-year-old grandma who we followed. When I met her in Southeast Asia, she had tremendous guilt toward the Kim regime. And in fact, she hadn't wanted to defect. She defected because she felt like she had to. So there are a lot of people inside North Korea who do believe that their country, as difficult as it may be at times to live there, is actually better off than the rest of the world.
Right, I see. Let's focus now, Madeleine, a bit more on the technicalities of your document. What do you suppose were some of the more challenging aspects in making your documentary?
There were so many challenging aspects. I would say, you know, we were able to follow attempted escapes from the border of North Korea and China, which is a place that nobody really goes and nobody really wants to go. And we were able to do that because of Pastor Kim and the Underground Railroad. Pastor Kim essentially line produced our entire shoot in China through the Underground Railroad. We had a mandate at the beginning of making this film that we would not put any additional risk onto the risk that the people we were following were already under. Because, for the Rowe family, a family of 5 who we follow, they had escaped over the border, over the river from North Korea into China. They were in incredible risk just on their own. And so we wanted to make sure we didn't add anything to that. And, to that end, every single decision about who could be where, who could shoot what cameras could be used, et cetera, had to go through many, many consultants, through the Underground Railroad, through Pastor Kim. And in China, none of us went into China. Pastor Kim has not gone into China since 2009, when he was warned that if he ever went into China again, he could be kidnapped into North Korea. So the only people that were able to shoot in China were the Underground Railroad and one family member of the Rowe family. And all of that was arranged through Pastor Kim. So that was incredibly logistically difficult, and we never could have done it without him and without his vast network.
So essentially, your documentary includes all this raw footage taken by these people who are actually involved in the plight of allowing these North Koreans escape from their country to a third country, perhaps for a new, safer life.
Yes, and we were able to go to Southeast Asia. We were able to shoot in Southeast Asia. We were able to follow Pastor Kim into Southeast Asia. But certainly in China, it was all flip phones. It was all Underground Railroad. And yeah, I mean, there were brokers, there were farmers. There's also, the broker world is a very complicated world, and there are many different factors involved. There are people who have no sympathy whatsoever toward the defectors and really only see them as a means of making money. There are people who do have some sympathy and yet need to make a living and are also in the Underground Railroad to make a living, but do have some sympathetic feelings. There are people who are missionaries, who are involved with the missionary cause and, have a religious bent in what they're doing. And then there are people who are not religious, but they are in the Underground Railroad for the cause and for the hope of helping to provide or give people an opportunity for some semblance of freedom in their lives. So there's a lot of people in the Underground Railroad, and throughout, even when we were shooting in Southeast Asia, we did have members of the Underground Railroad shooting alongside with us as well.
Right. Madeleine, the title of the documentary, Beyond Utopia, is that an oxymoron of sorts, or is it like an irony? Or is it perhaps the awareness of these North Koreans realizing that life beyond their country actually is very different from what they were led to believe while they were inside their own homeland?
Yes, it is a purposely ironic, title. Because again, in North Korea, you are brought up to believe that the rest of the world is worse off than North Korea. And, as Hyun-seo Lee, who's a defector, who's in our film, says in the film, she was brought up to believe this was Utopia. And, she also had talked about, and other defectors I've spoken to have talked about this as well, talked about standing on the banks of the Yalu River on the North Korean side and looking toward China and looking toward Changbai Mountain, these huge mountains, and wondering, what is beyond those mountains. And so that was where I got the title, was this idea of beyond Utopia, what is beyond this place that we believed or thought, or were told in any case, is Utopia, what is beyond that? Because most people, most defectors, when they go over the river into China, and this was true with the Rowe family, they know that this is the way out, right? Over the river toward China is the way out, but they don't know what that means, what the geography is, they don't know how big China is. Where do you go once you get over the river? Where do you go from there? So I love this idea of just sort of this sort of almost amorphous, like beyond Utopia. You don't know where you're going, but you're going beyond this place that's standing behind you.
Right, for sure. Madeleine, speaking within your capacity as the director of this documentary, how do you explain the critical acclaim that the documentary has been garnering?
Well, first of all, I'm so grateful for it. But I really think that it is about the fact that people don't realize that we haven't been hearing from North Koreans. And when they see this film, they realize that we haven't been hearing from North Koreans, and they realize how unjust that is, And I do think also, and this is thanks to, everybody who's been involved with this film, we amazingly were able in the end to kind of put audiences in the shoes of North Koreans to really experience their attempted escape in a visceral way, in an experiential way. And this was something, from the beginning when I felt like this film had to be made. And then when I eventually met Pastor Kim and he and I spent many months getting to know each other. And at a certain point, we decided, okay, we actually want to do this together. One of the things is that he and I both had the same idea of what needed to be done, which was to do something experiential, which was, since North Koreans their voices have not been heard, certainly in the United States, in more than 70 years, now 75 years, we wanted to do something that would force people, where people couldn't turn away, where people had to feel what these people were going through. It's this idea that I always think about in my work, the more specific, the more universal. It's like if you can drill down into one story, one experience, it actually can resonate with so many people. And I think that that's a part of why people are responding to the film, is because people are really feeling the plight of North Koreans, and they're feeling the voices of North Koreans and the injustice toward North Koreans, and the fact that we need to advocate for them on the outside, since it is so difficult for North Koreans to advocate for themselves inside the country.
Essentially, Madeleine, your project, this documentary film itself, it puts a face on the many, many stories of suffering that we hear about with regard to people in North Korea. What broader role, that being said, do you hope your documentary will play in addressing the plight of North Korean defectors in general?
Well, one thing I hope for sure is that, from now on, when the words North Korea are mentioned, the people are mentioned. Because again, in the United States for so long, North Korea, all we hear about are the missiles, the parades. We never heard about the people. And I do believe that if every single news organization, like what you're doing, every time they talk about North Korea, they talk about the people, I think that's going to have some kind of impact. And, I think our film at least has opened people's eyes to this and have opened curiosity. And I think people who are seeing the film are starting to ask questions about the people of North Korea. They're not satisfied to just hear about the missiles. They actually want to hear about the people. So that's key. I also think, obviously, advocating, speaking to China, protesting to the Chinese government. The people in our film, Soyeon, Pastor Kim, the Rowe family, they have been with us on and off since our film first came out a year ago. And, they've been advocating. They've been in Washington, D.C. They've been protesting in front of the Chinese embassy. Soyeon has written letters to the North Korean regime. And I hope that audiences will do the same. And we'll never forget these people. And we'll realize that every single moment, there are 26 million people inside North Korea, at this moment. And we need to bring their voices forward, not just with this film, but in every single mention about North Korea. That's what I believe.
And I suppose it has already, though, started national conversations, so to speak, in different countries, of course, with regard to human rights in North Korea, right? Apart from calling on China to seek caution, that is, or not to repatriate North Korean defectors back to their country.
Yes, it has. We've had, screenings with the government in South Korea. We've had screenings in Washington, D.C. We've had screenings with the State Department. We've had we're having a screening in the UK for the government in a couple of weeks. I mean, it has definitely started to have an impact with governments around the world.
And that
I hope that it will just...
Right, of course. Madeleine, what message essentially do you hope to share with the Korean government as well as the Korean public through your documentary?
Well, again, to, speak out against the human rights abuses inside North Korea, to continue to call out the North Korean regime about the human rights abuses, to advocate and appeal to other countries, to governments all over the world. I mean, I do think China is also key in this, because China has a policy, as you know, of repatriating any North Korean they find within their soil back to North Korea, knowing what will happen to those people. And if China stopped that policy, everything would change inside North Korea. But I think this has to happen with every country around the world. And, South Korea, again, being the family of North Koreans. I know so many people whose families were split apart, when Korea was split into two. And, so South Koreans have even more of a investment in helping their former fellow countrymen and women. And so I'm really excited by the way that the government in South Korea has embraced our film. And I really hope that audiences are going to, again, speak out for their former fellow countrymen and women and give voice to their concerns and their plight.
Right, indeed. Well, Madeleine, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for starting the conversation yet again on the people of North Korea in hopes of easing their hardships.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.
Right, well, on that note, we say goodbye. Korea is looking ahead to a long weekend to mark the Lunar New Year holiday, so do join us again same time next Tuesday. Thank you for watching.